everyone. Welcome to Turing's Distinguished Leader Series. This is the series where I have conversations with wonderful engineering leaders from leading companies to hear their best practices on engineering, building engineering teams, scaling engineering organizations, and share their lessons with other leaders. I'm Jonathan Siddharth, CEO and co-founder of Turing. Turing offers the world's most deeply vetted developers and teams matched by AI. If you're building an engineering team, push a button and spin up your team on Turing.com. With that, I'd love to welcome our very special guest today, Rebecca Campbell, who's SVP of Engineering at Mural. Mural is an amazing tool for distributed teams, and I'm sure we'll talk about that during our conversation today. And maybe to start off with, Rebecca, if you could share a few words about your background and what you do at Mural, we'll get started with our conversation.
Sure. First, hi everybody. So I've been in tech in one form or another. Primarily as a software engineer for about 25 years now, a little more. So part of my background or part of what led me to Mural, I was a VP of engineering at Relic previously. I then co-founded a startup called Caregiven, where we built a mobile app helping people with both the logistical and emotional journeys of being a family caregiver. And then I came to Mural about a year ago, just totally fascinated by our product and the space. The world is changing, continues to change how we work. And so Mural is a huge part of that story. And it's just really exciting to just be able to have that impact on a changing world.
That's great, Rebecca. The world has changed since 2020, with distributed teams becoming the norm and distributed collaboration becoming the norm. It's such an exciting time, and you've had an interesting journey where you've led engineering teams, I would say, through the time when the default was on-prem in-office engineering teams to today, where the default is a remote distributed team, sometimes a very geographically distributed team. And our audience, Rebecca, is a lot of engineering managers, CTOs, VPs of engineering, from startups all the way up to Fortune 1000 companies. And I'd love to hear your perspective on, for engineering managers today who are leading distributed teams, what are some best practices you've observed for building a world-class engineering organization in this remote-first world? And how is it different from that office-first world? Any advice, pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah. So, in an office first world, although I should say a lot of my background is working globally. So although I've primarily worked in offices or at company that had offices, I've worked with companies that had offices in multiple places and multiple time zones. So a lot of work with at two different companies. We had one, we had an office in Sweden, and another, I worked really closely in building out big teams in Barcelona. So I've had some experience building remote teams before. And the big thing is, really, so hiring matters. You have to, and setting those expectations when you're hiring, I think can be really powerful. Expectations around communication, expectations around kind of standards, but then also building those team rhythms and those connection points becomes really important. You've got time zones that you're dealing with, right? So finding times and sometimes the expectations are, I know you're an engineer and you don't want to get up at 8 a.m. to have a meeting, but your colleagues are 9 time zones away. And so that's going to be an expectation. And sometimes they're just more around, we can do this work asynchronously. We can find different patterns that enable us to be successful without always being in the same conference room or the same meeting room. So that's a big one. The other thing is just making sure that one of the big things with global teams, I found is giving people the opportunity to work autonomously. So within their groups, decision making, I think, needs to live as close to the problem as possible. A lot of people have read the book Turn the Ship Around. There's some of those same ideas there, where leaders are really setting the conditions for people to thrive, whether they're in their home office or in an office. And now we have such a mix of both, right? But so no matter where people are, like setting those conditions for people to thrive, and one of those is making sure that decisions don't take 2 or 3 back and forths overnight. So turning into 3 or 4 days just to make a decision that should be simple and should be able to be owned kind of more close to the problem. If that makes sense.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. Like I took away 3 main things, which was hiring matters, communication is really important, and setting the right kind of expectations around communication norms with the company, like time zone, things like that. And then you shared something that was interesting as well, which is making sure that there's a lot of autonomous, decentralized decision making happening sort of close to the problem, so that there's not a big round trip back and forth to make decisions.
Yeah, you need to set that vision and kind of the guardrails, but then let people make those autonomous decisions.
That's right. And for Mural, like, how do you enforce these norms? Like, for example, when you hire a new engineering manager or you hire new engineers, how do you share all of this? Like, do you follow like the GitLab style? Are there any sort of manuals that you've written for how to operate as a distributed team? How do you ensure everybody is aligned with these working norms?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of documentation in Confluence, but everywhere I've been, I find that those norms are really just enforced by being intentional about your culture and by kind of repetitively explaining them.
Yeah.
And then you want to hire people who are pretty adaptable and can kind of figure out like, oh, I see how we're doing this, right? I think that kind of flexibility and an ability to kind of learn through that context, I think, is very important, and especially in a startup, right? For lots of reasons. Yeah. So that's one way, and then sometimes it's easy through cadence and rituals, right? Just to kind of reinforce those norms, and then other times it takes more explicit coaching. So again, kind of depends on the situation. More broadly, though, yeah, we rely on kind of our Confluence documentation, and then one-on-ones with managers and team rituals to reinforce those.
Yeah, great, Rebecca. And just to contextualize your advice for our listeners, how large is the engineering team at Mural today?
We are about 200 people, a little more.
Yeah. Got it. So it's about Turing's scale, like in size.
Yeah.
And and you spoke about hiring, Rebecca, and hiring is really where it all starts, right? In terms of building a team. What is your advice for engineering leaders in when they are like heads of engineering, when they are hiring when they're hiring their directs, like the senior, like when you're making director, VP level hires to build your engineering organization?
Yeah, that's a good question. The hard thing about hiring at that level, as I'm sure you know, is everybody you interview knows the right answers to your questions, right? They're pretty pro at talking through things, and so I like to get people to, and this is in any interview, I like to get people to explain something to me, so I can kind of see how's their communication, how are their thought process, and it can be just anything like that you're learning right now. For like, it can be what you're doing out in your garden. It can be a Raspberry Pi project you've got going on. I don't really care, but it can really help you understand people's clarity of thought. Are they linear thinkers? Are they kind of looping around back to the subject? Is it a communication style that's going to work for your teams? Do you think they can drive that vision and clarity through to their directs and beyond, right? However many layers of hierarchy they're working through. Are they going to be able to carry those messages? So that's one thing I like to do. And then, just generally talking about experience. And I also like to ask people where they're headed, right? Is it, do you have a 5-year plan? Do you have just kind of what's right now and what's next plan? And there's never a right answer to that, but it kind of helps you understand if this is the right fit for that person on their journey. Because I think it's easy to get that wrong sometimes as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting, Rebecca. And between hiring for an in-office team versus a distributed team, when you're hiring engineering leaders, is there anything different or additional that you look for when you're looking for an engineering manager who can manage a distributed team?
That's
or is it just is just higher? Because you have to be excellent at communication and probably work from different cultures.
Yeah, I think both the written and the verbal communication needs go up because you don't have. Actually, we had an in-person meeting recently, and I was like, "Oh man, eye contact is so powerful, right?" But you don't have that on Zoom. I mean, if somebody stares into their camera, you kind of simulate it, but it's not something that you have. So yeah, those ways to connect, and I think that also you want people who can come across personably on video. So are people all business all the time, or can they maybe step back and do a little icebreaker with their team, build some camaraderie? It's a lot harder to sort of generate that inspiration and kind of like team feeling remotely, but it's totally doable. And so you just want leaders who I think can be intentional too about setting that culture and kind of really understand that they're they're carriers of that culture, right? And they're setting the tone.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And you might have seen this mildly creepy AI app, which apparently, speaking of eye contact, apparently it adjusts the eyes of the of the people on Zoom to make it seem like they're making eye contact with you. And
that is super creepy.
Yes, there's a part of me that wants to try it just to see how it would look. Like it'll be very uncanny valley too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somewhat hypnotic.
That sounds like a fun thing to play with, but not a good thing to rely on, maybe.
Yeah. That's right. And Rebecca, you touched on some important parts, which is the importance of building connection and forming good relationships in a distributed team. I'd be curious, any advice, tips you have for engineering managers on what they can do to build strong, authentic relationships among their team. Any best practices from the Mural playbook for the same? Because you are a distributed team yourself, right?
Yeah, we're totally remote. We do have an office in Buenos Aires, which is where Mural started, but not a lot of people are in there all the time, and so we're most people who go into the office are not there full time.
Yeah, we have an office like that in Palo Alto, which collects mail that nobody picks up.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it's really like making space for your teams to form those connections and forming those connections yourself. So we use Mural a lot. We do some really fun like icebreakers or check-ins. One of my favorite ones is a food fight. It is amazing how food preferences can create such healthy debate and very strong opinions. It turns out olives, pineapple on pizza, and then for our South American friends, coffee versus yerba mate. We have some very strong opinions, and so you can actually generate just a lot of. We just, we'll put a picture on a mural of, pineapple on a pizza and olives, and people will go in and express their very strong opinions and then, talk about them and things like that. I think that's some of the ways we have fun. We also have done virtual Legos in Mural. So there's one fun one where everybody makes a duck out of Legos and you compare ducks later. And it really kind of brings out the creativity and gives people that common experience to then, bounce off of and take conversations even further and kind of build deeper connections. So those kind of silly things I think are really important. And that's one of the things we do. And then we'll do things like what Zoom doesn't show you, but you should know is a fun one where everybody can bring something off camera into the screen and show and even like take a picture and put it on a mural, and then people can kind of comment on it or draw things around it or whatever. Those are good kind of icebreakers or ways to kind of foster community. We also do affinity groups. So we have 7 at Mural, like our employee resource groups. We have, for women and caregivers and people of color. We've got several different ones that people can just kind of make connections with people who they have similarities with or have something in common with in smaller group settings. I think that's pretty important too. And then we do try to have some playfulness in, our Slack channels. I like the miscellaneous. We have a New York Times mini crossword channel where people just post their scores on the on the quick New York Times crossword. I check in on the cats and dogs channel fairly frequently just to kind of see how people's pets are getting on. And just finding those kind of different ways to make human connection, I think, it's really important. It's so easily done in person, right? You're going to get a cup of coffee. How was your weekend, right? For someone who you wouldn't interact with otherwise, and so you have to be more intentional about that in a remote setting.
Yeah, I love your philosophy, Rebecca. It feels like you infuse a little bit of creativity, fun, playfulness to the sort of outside of sort of the nonstop Slack Zoom sort of day that a lot of distributed teams go through. I think it's good to break up that monotony with some different creative ways to build connection, like through icebreakers and games.
Yeah. I really, not to go on about Mural too much, but it's a lot of what Mural allows, right? Is not just your standard kind of dry business meeting. It allows for a lot of creativity and fun and playfulness. So we use it kind of, in our off-label ways, right, for icebreakers and things like that. But then we also do a lot of serious business in there.
That's actually super interesting, Rebecca. Like I thought of Mural primarily as a collaboration tool for distributed teams, but it's interesting you're using it also for like these for team building and these types of activities. Like, what are like the top 3 use cases, ways in which Mural uses Mural?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I have an executive meeting every week, and we use it for a check-in. So everybody next to their picture puts a colored dot for how they're doing in their home life, and then one for how they're doing in their professional life. Mm-hmm. And we just do a little check-in, and it kind of grounds everybody in the meeting, kind of gets us all thinking in the same space. Also, icebreakers or check-ins are really good for leaving behind whatever you were thinking about before the meeting. So you're all kind of in there. Yeah. So it's good for that. We use it a ton for brainstorming. I've heard people say, facilitators say things like, I've never seen a group of people get that many ideas out so quickly, but we're so used to the tool, and we do use it very effectively, I should say. That we're all pretty used to just jumping in and like putting a bunch of ideas on a mural and sticky notes, and it's really powerful. And then we can kind of affinity group them and kind of get closer to where we need to go much faster. So those are probably the top 2 use cases I'm using right now. In addition, we have just a whole bunch of templates that help for everything from like OKR planning to lots of ideas for icebreakers for your teams to, guided methods for, any kind of business process that you're trying to run.
Yeah. That's great, Rebecca. And for like our audience, which includes these engineering leaders, founders, etc., And today, everyone's building their teams in a fully distributed way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say they are building a distributed team from Turing. They've also already built their engineering team that's globally distributed. They're using Slack and Zoom perhaps for like communication collaboration. They're using Mural for collaboration and keeping people aligned and for all of this. What would be three other tools that you would recommend for a distributed team to sort of be world class in terms of its tool stack?
Yeah. Well, one that we use a lot is Loom, where you can pre-record videos sharing your screen. You've got your little, you're nodding. I think you've seen it, but
Yes.
For those who haven't, you've got the narrator's picture in a little circle on the screen, but you're able to walk people through frequently. So we'll have a mural and a Loom, and we'll say, here's the Loom that walks you through the mural, and here's the mural. You can go in and add your own comments, add your own ideas, make changes, or just reference it if that's appropriate. And that's pretty great for pre-work for meetings. I'm not a huge fan of pre-work for all meetings, but some of them require it. And if you can get, a 7-minute Loom out there that everybody watches and then have a much more productive half-hour meeting, let's say your team is globally distributed and time zones are an issue, you can get everybody on the same page much more quickly that way, and then surface questions in the meeting as opposed to kind of setting the whole context there. So we use Loom a lot in that way. The simple Google Doc or Word doc or whatever online shared document you can use to collaborate, I think is very powerful. It just gets those ideas, gets people commenting. I'm a big fan of, getting a rough draft down and then asking my team to help me strengthen something. And they'll go in and make suggestions or just make edits, comment on things, ask for clarity. And that is a wonderful way to work, especially asynchronously. And that's probably one of my favorite tools outside of Mural for that. I'm trying to think of a third one. We use Slack a whole lot, but you already mentioned that one.
Yeah.
But Slack is probably where the bulk of our communication goes. We almost don't use email internally in favor of Slack.
Got it. Is there any sort of Slack power feature or quirk that Mural uses that you haven't seen used in companies outside of Mural, like a unique way in which you use it?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do have some, and I'm trying to remember what it's called, but there's like a way to format Slack messages. It's a separate tool that then uses the Slack API. I can't remember if I think it's provided by Slack. It's a little clunky to use, but it does provide, horizontal lines and, breaks and things like that, some better formatting options. So we use that. And then we have a pretty rich emoji culture, which I think adds a lot of kind of just flair to our Slack messages. I like that you can kind of see a lot of engagement from the company just through the number of emojis that are there. I don't think that's probably unique to us. The thing that I learned when I first started was actually organizing my sidebar, breaking it up into groups of channels or individuals so that I can, for instance, I have one that's for my team. And it's toward the top. So I know, if I get a message from my team, I'm going to see that more quickly than I have some, I have one called non-urgent that are some channels I like to look in, but I don't need to be there every day. So that has actually really helped my productivity and the deluge of Slack comments.
That's great. And Rebecca, Turing, as you know, has about 2 million developers on our platform. We have about 80,000 developers signing up every month. And these are engineers from all over the world across a wide variety of roles like front end, back end, mobile, AI, etc. Different tech stacks, different seniority levels. What would your advice be? And I know that there'll be our developers listening to this too. What is your advice for an engineer today? And let's maybe make it more concrete. Let's imagine it's an engineer from LATAM who is a few years out of college, wants to grow their career. What would your advice be for them in today's world?
Yeah, my advice for anybody earlier in their career is sometimes early on it's hard. You're just trying to get your first job, or your second. After that, it gets a lot easier. But while you're in that state, it can be hard. But once you've kind of crossed that, my advice is just to get interested in something. And it's easy to get distracted, to worry about things. I've talked to a lot of early career engineers who are like, "Oh, do I have to start doing tech talks? I'm not ready for that yet." If you're not ready for it, you're not ready for it. Just that it's a great way to learn more and to do things like that. But my thing is just like get focused on something, get really interested in something, and dive in. Explore, be curious. Some people go for breadth, and some people go for depth, and most people, I think, do that at different times in their career. So it's okay. A lot of the coaching I've done with earlier career engineers is basically just saying this is normal, right? Whatever your experience. Well, I'm worried I don't know all these things. Well, are you going deep right now, or are you going broad right now? And either of those is perfectly valid and perfectly fine. So I think for if I could go back and talk to myself previously, it would be worry less, right? It's all going to work out. It's fine. But for others, especially right now, I think it's there is a higher expectation of communication. So make sure that you're clear when you communicate. And sometimes that involves just staying in the conversation and saying, I don't understand, which can be really hard in any profession. But especially engineers are, rewarded for being pretty smart. And so it's hard sometimes to say, like, I don't know what that means, or I don't know how to I don't know how to do that. But those can be some of the most valuable conversations you have. They sometimes, very frequently in my experience, reveal that other people have the same question, and it's great that you're actually kind of working through that.
That's great. And when you hire engineers for Mural, what do you and your team look for, Rebecca?
Yeah, so we look for. We touched on this a little bit earlier, some curiosity and a focus on getting things done, I think, are probably my top two.
Right. So that's true both for managers as well as for ICs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you need both of those, or those both apply kind of across the board, or maybe that's just my own bias, but that's what I look for. And then for engineers, you want kind of a customer centricity mindset. So not necessarily that engineers are out there talking to customers all the time, but they can really keep that customer in mind while they're developing solutions. I think that's pretty powerful. And then the ability to collaborate and act on a team. I think showing some experience. The sort of glue work that gets overlooked a lot is probably one of the more important things on a team, especially remotely, making sure that that teams are coordinated in what they're doing. They're not duplicating work. They're not stepping on each other's toes in the code base, what have you. So the ability to kind of conceive of the whole team and find the right place in it to contribute, I think is pretty important. It's hard to ferret all that out in an interview, but those are the types of things and awarenesses I'm looking for.
Yeah. Rebecca, I heard curiosity, customer centricity, ability to collaborate well with others and coordinate and well with others, and you said awareness. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's. Yeah. I think that covers it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to assess some of that in an interview, right? Like this is. Do you ever do the sort of like a period of time where you work together before you start? Have you tried versions of that, or do you at Mural still?
I haven't tried that before. I think. Well, the hiring environment is changing right now, but for much of my career, it's been the speed to the candidate experience needs to be, I think, very intentional and needs to be pretty speedy to get that top talent, because it's so easy to lose candidates who have other job prospects. And so I prefer, you have to validate that the skills are there for sure, and that they're a match for what you need on your team.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I like to go for some speed. We've definitely done some like pair programming at previous companies. We actually did some, pretty intensive pair programming as part of the interview process. Not so much to get to the right answer, but to view that, or to get a view into, thought processes and teamwork and all that kind of stuff. But that's as close as we've come.
Got it. Great, Rebecca. I think we're at time. This was a wonderful conversation. I think lots of great advice for engineering leaders. Before we wrap, was there anything else you wanted to share with our audience?
Oh, well, that went fast.
Yes.
So it's been enjoyable talking to you. No, I think, I think that, these are exciting times. The world continues to shift how we work. I think we have to be intentional about culture, especially now. But I think I already said all that. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And for everybody, this is Rebecca Campbell, SVP of Engineering at Mural. And if you're running as a remote distributed team, and you probably should if you aren't, if you're running as a distributed team, you should check out Mural. It's a wonderful tool for teams to collaborate, work together, stay aligned. And today I learned it seems like it's also a good tool to build connection and have some fun.
It is. Thank you, Jonathan.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again next episode.